What is going on, everybody? I am well aware that we are not looking at, let me see. Yeah, you're not looking at picture. I'm adjusting it in the background as we move along. I don't quite know why everything got out of sync, but I made a silly decision to just roll it. And turns out just rolling it isn't exactly good for business. So you guys get to watch me crop everything as we move along. So let's see here. Just getting way too excited. This is awesome, Danny. I mean, like, can you get a better win than pretty much the win that the Bears just had? I don't know. Like, this one ruled. Right. And you know, it's funny because Draco, before we get the podcast started, like, I totally hear you. I absolutely respect that you were out there saying that this team's going to be really good. And I don't think that there was any way. Oh, yeah. It's Danny's mic. Got you. Thank you, Ian B. Danny, go ahead and talk.
What's up, Mike?
No, nothing was wrong. I just hadn't patched your sound through because I wanted to make sure that when we were talking pre-show, you didn't get heard. You're on now. Or you should be.
Oh, awesome. Hi.
We'll deal with this little picture for the first game of the season because while we are while this is Chambly, the Bears were not. But overall, Draco, I feel like this was a game that it would be very easy to tell yourself that the Bears are going to give themselves a shot. But I felt like, at the very least, I felt like predicting that the Bears were going to hold the 49ers to 10 was getting way too excited about contesting one of the best play callers in the NFL and a quarterback that I really like in Trey Lance. But hey, credit to Matt Eberflus, credit to this Bears team. Like, you're going to see as we get the show started that, to me, this was a huge, huge game for everybody out there that was saying that hiring a defensive head coach is not intrinsically evil. I mean, Danny, I ended up really lucky that I asked you before the game started to have you on because you were one of the biggest people I knew in my personal life that was get the best coach, not just the best offensive coach. And honestly, a game like today was a real reminder that, look, it's not that they dug it out with defense, so to speak, right? It's that the whole team played cohesive football that blended together. They obviously, we can make all the jokes we want, Danny, about they didn't take any penalties coming out of a timeout, right? Like, yes, obviously. But the defense kept the Bears in it until the offense found just enough to make it a one-possession game. The defense got them the ball back, and then they took the lead. Then the defense took the ball away, and they distanced themselves before the rain decided the game was over. Like, they got some help from the football gods today, but credit to them. If you're going to be a spiny defensive... Let me put it this way, Danny. This looked like a John Harbaugh coach team, right? Like, this looked like a John Harbaugh win, a Mike Tomlin win. And I'm not putting Eberflus in that category, obviously, but not every team spaces their opponent with 30 points, but they found a way to win the game today, and that works out, you know?
Absolutely. And, first things first, I got to tell you, I got to give a lot of credit to Brandon in terms of one specific player going into draft season. Like, I personally didn't see what this level of player was coming out of Jaquan Brisker. I liked him at Penn State. I didn't see this guy, though, who's just pretty much a roving bat out of hell every time he comes down to hit somebody. It's frankly a revelation compared to what we've seen next to Eddie for a couple of years now with Deshaun Gibson, which no discredit to Deshaun. He's, serves wonderful player. He's actually lining up against the Bears today, but it's just the guy looks like a star in the making after, give it time, obviously, but one game.
Oh my goodness. Like, he was fabulous. Like, we'll talk about this when we actually get the show going, Danny, but I felt like Deshaun Gibson, I forgot he played in this game. But so I felt like Brandon Kyler Gordon looked like a normal rookie defensive back. I mean, when people were asking in the offseason, because I remember fielding these questions on Twitter, how do you think that the defensive backs are going to struggle? Like, we just invested a second-round pick. It's stuff like that, right? It's stuff like getting your feet tied up on an outbreaking route that you're just not used to because you've been playing football at Washington, not in the NFL, where everybody's extremely good. Like, that stuff's normal. But Brisker slotted right in today. And I mean, we got to talk about Eddie Jackson during the show. Like, I feel that pick was just huge.
And that was vintage Eddie. He read it, he broke, he took the ball. That was just wow.
I can't wait for the presser. Obviously, people are going to ask him about it. I'm dying to know whether he read Lance or whether he baited Lance, because he took a hard step to his left, like away from the throw, and then broke back into it. And
he did. I'd have to go see the play again. I don't think Lance
we're
left
gonna
that
know.
read.
No, of course not.
Yeah, I don't think Lance ever left it. Like, that was just it. Like, he was there, and then it was like, I'm either throwing this or I'm taking off.
Right. Oh, 100%. It's just hard to tell whether Eddie, for instance, took a step to his left and then realized, wait a second, and broke back, or whether he knew that this rookie quarterback was likely going to throw that slant for the 5th time that game, right? Mm-hmm. And he took a step away from it, knowing he'd get the arm to start moving, and broke back immediately to take his chance. Because if that's the case, man, what a huge play. I mean, safeties aren't supposed to, despite what I swear sometimes Twitter and the NFL community seems to think, safeties aren't quote unquote supposed to find interceptions. Like, quarterbacks are supposed to look you off if you're in the right position. You know what I mean? It's tough. If he actually pulled Lance into making a mistake that pretty much clinched the game for him, like, I came into this game saying the 49ers probably have it if Lance doesn't throw the game away. It was just one interception, and Fields' interception might have been debatably worse in terms of just like which quarterback made the bigger mistake, but goodness, what a horrible time to throw a pick, right?
Right. Awful timing. And you could just, it was one of those things, like, I'm not a believer in like game-to-game momentum. Like, I don't think this win today matters next week in terms of how they played in Lambeau, you know? Mm-hmm. I am a believer in confidence. Like, we know we can play now. We can play with one of the big boys. They just beat the team that beat Green Bay last year in the playoffs, right?
Yep.
And now, but I am, what I was getting at those, I am a believer in in-game momentum. When all of a sudden that 51-yard broken touchdown to Dante Pettis happens, you could feel like almost the tide turning in-game. The crowd got a little bit louder. The defense got a little more spring in their step. And it's like, it's palpable almost. You can feel it.
Yep. And the funny part is that, like, okay, so Danny, we'll have just a little bit more conversation, then we got to get this pod started. But
absolutely,
tell you what, I felt like, okay, so far be it from me to put my tinfoil hat on, but I am gonna put it on for a little bit.
Here comes the tinfoil.
I thought Fields with the glove on looked like he couldn't grip the ball today. I mean, he normally throws with so much more zip on the ball, and it looked like the offense was making a concerted effort to not throw it. It seemed like there must have been some kind of issue pregame, because, like, I get it, the Bears want to run the ball, but running the ball on over 65% of your plays is a little much, don't you think? Like, even before things had gotten out of hand. And on that Fields interception to Mooney, look, it's probably an interception even if he throws it as hard as he can. But so I'll use a better example. That out route, or the curl route that they had on the comebacker that almost got intercepted.
To EQ?
Yeah. Fields lollipopped that one in there pretty bad compared to his normal.
I also thought he read it late. Mm-hmm. I thought he read it late, and he didn't put the ball where it needed to be. Those throws need to be low and outside.
Right.
Put that thing mid and inside.
100%.
Oh, God.
And Tumultuous Titan, to exactly that point, it probably did have something to do with the wetness. So until further notice, I'll leave it out there, or like I'll leave it out, because the irony, Dan, the throw to Pettis wasn't even outrageously like good. I mean, I'm not. No.
It was fluttering. It looked like a duck.
Right. I mean, he found a guy so wide open that when he stapled the ball to him, and I mean, he didn't lead him at all. He just threw directly to where he was standing. He had so much space. He could get in the end zone anyways, and that works for me. Good quarterbacking, like we've seen with Aaron Rodgers for forever, right? Can come down to, can you make the right decision? And when you make the right decision, what do your playmakers do with the ball? And hey, There's a reason that we have seen Aaron Rodgers put guys like James Jones, Donald Driver, Randall Cobb, Greg Jennings, any name, Jordy Nelson, like all sorts of names up and down the Packers receiving roster have embarrassed teams throughout the league because of quality quarterbacking. And Dante Pettis found a way to turn that quote-unquote lollipop into a touchdown, like right off the bat, 51-yarder no less. And so it's interesting because you look at this and it's like, was the throw to EQ on the touchdown like a hard throw? EQ was wide open, but he didn't miss it. Because I know Lance missed out on a touchdown earlier in the game under a little bit of
Lance missed his tight end. He was open.
Right. So it's not like Fields threw the ball super well today, but he did enough. And I guess that's defensive minded football to some degree, isn't it? It's did you win or did you lose?
Did you not lose? Cool.
Did you win or did you lose? Anyways, you ready to roll?
Let's go. Whenever you are.
Let's do this thing. And before we get started, can everybody hear Danny okay? Does he come through quiet? Because I hear him at a pretty standard volume. Want to hear before we get things going so that I don't unintentionally run something where it's like, I can hear Robert.
1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh yeah. Well, so in Streamlabs, I used to have an issue, Danny, where like your sound or whoever's on the other side's sound was too loud.
No,
it would sound too loud, and so I turned you down about 8 decibels. And I want to be sure you're not like quiet. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I'm not in the hotel room.
See. Thank you guys. I'll give him about 4 dBs. Danny, talk a little more.
Check 1 2 1 2. I am looking at Minka Fitzpatrick and now Joe Burrow.
Okay, what happened in that Bengals game? They're
still playing.
Oh my goodness! How'd the Steelers not win?
Playing.
All I know is that Joe Shiesty.
They just had a sack fumble to get the ball back, and looked like Deontay just caught a pass.
Okay. Missed field
goals.
They're driving
now. They're on their own 30, and that's vintage Mitch just running around.
No.
And he hit the tight end. Look at that.
There you go. Perfect.
Fryermuth.
Let's roll, Danny. Perfect. Go. All right, 3, 2. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel. And Danny, against all odds, against what could have been a really nasty game after the first half, the Chicago Bears have started the season on the right foot. They are 1-0. They picked up a win against the theoretically Super Bowl contending San Francisco 49ers, and what a good feeling it is. Danny Meehan, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mr. Robert Schmitz. How are you?
I mean, come on. The Bears start the season in the win column, and not to mention kind of rescue a game that looked like it was going south. I mean, we started off with a nasty enough first half that we will get into once we're done with the positive stuff, because I don't really want to talk about a first half that looked like the Bears offense was completely toothless. But a wild 51-yard touchdown pass off of a big scramble from Justin Fields seemed to energize the entire football team after the defense had turned in quite a stout first half and, frankly, second half leading up to that point, holding San Francisco to an early 10 points that they never picked up anymore. I mean, this to me, Danny, I'll start with my biggest takeaway, seemed like a total vindication of the Eberflus hire. We have one football game. He is not coach of the year. He is not coach of the decade. He's not the greatest Bears coach to ever live, and I'm not saying that. But this was absolutely classic defensive head coach football where the Bears had limited penalties, took opportunities or made good on opportunities when the 49ers committed penalties, played stout, consistent defense that made life tough for a young quarterback, and eventually Justin Fields did a Justin Fields thing, and the offense literally scored touchdowns exclusively the 2 drives after that. I mean, this is in a sense, Danny, the weird part about this is that it was kind of a dream game when you look at the boxes that are ticked, right? Justin Fields
In a
led
way,
the
yeah.
Justin Fields led the offense, and it was clearly Justin Fields too. It was not David Montgomery's 17 carries for 27 yards. Like, Justin Fields led the offense to whatever points they could get, even if 19 points wasn't many. Matt Eberflus's hits philosophy came up huge, with Jalen Johnson kicking the game off with an early fumble that was immediate, or that took points straight off the board, and stingy defense after that. Huge takeaway by Eddie Jackson, too. Luke Getsy's offense started to click a little bit after that 51-yard crazy play by Justin Fields, ending in another Justin Fields touchdown. Fields, despite a nasty interception, finishes the game with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, like, you look at the boxes that I feel like we came into the season looking to tick, and this game fit them. And the Bears beat a team that I certainly wasn't giving them a chance against, and I don't think most national media pundits were either. Tell me how you're feeling.
I mean, it's kind of like, in a way, like we kind of talked pre-show, Robert. It was a little bit of vindication for me because I was like one of the few people. It felt like that it's like I wasn't like just hire the offensive guy just to get a quarterback guy in the room. That I just was like, find the best head coach. And for me, coaching is always about getting more than the sum of your parts. You go up and down, for instance, like you said, the defense bowed its neck today. It bowed its neck. It came out, and they were hitting people. And, you know, I was even wondering in the first half, like, where Roquan was. And then all of a sudden he had his one thunderous hit against Trey Lance. And it was like Roquan had arrived in the second half, and he was flying around the ball. But to your point, Robert, they checked all the boxes. They came out. They played hard. They were disciplined, aside from one really weird penalty. That I didn't even know was a rule. With they dried some of the
that was bizarre.
I get it. You're the defensive head coach, and your special teams coordinator has got to know the rules. But I've never seen that called ever. Like, I didn't think that was a problem. Like, if anything, to me, it's like a safety thing. Like, he's making sure Cairo doesn't slip and like tear something,
right?
Pull something. Like, but we now know, and we're not going to hopefully see that again this year, but it's like it was 3 penalties versus, I guess, the 11 or 12 the San Francisco 49ers had. And it was, more importantly, don't beat yourself. Make them beat you. And that's kind of the hits philosophy in an instance, or for lack of a better term, the Tampa 2 or cover 2 philosophy. Give them enough plays, they're going to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all predicated on.
Yep.
Now, obviously, the conditions help you, but both teams were playing in both conditions. And I would argue, and I'm sure you would agree, I think Fields' interception was much more egregious than Trey Lance's.
Horrible. I mean,
that was a terrible throw and a terrible process.
It looked like a basic cover 3 look where the safety didn't drop out and he stayed in the middle of the field. Fields must have just never seen him. I can only imagine Fields thought that he had either a variant of cover 3 where that middle of the field was going to be open, or maybe that he saw the too high pre-snap and just assumed that they were going to stick with too high. Whatever was going on, he truly... What?
It could be as simple as just Mooney's his guy.
Could be.
When in doubt, go find 11. Where is he?
I mean, that's possible, but you can't throw middle of the field, dead center, 15 yards downfield blindly.
You cannot.
That stuff happens.
No, you cannot.
But 2 touchdowns help out. Right,
and that's like, again, the touchdown pass wasn't pretty. It was kind of a fluttering duck that got to a Dante Pettis, who was not within 20 yards of anybody.
Right.
He was wide open. He took it the distance, and it all of a sudden felt like the momentum after that play changed. And that's I think I even put it in our chat where I was like, it's a jump shooter seeing a 3-point shot go in.
Mm-hmm. He's
been cold all game. He's been missing, and all of a sudden he gets his corner 3, and it hits nothing but the bottom of the net.
Right.
And sometimes that's all you need to see is that one go in, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, thank God.
Not to mention, I feel like there were a lot of pieces of that offense that, okay, so look, Yes, I'm very excited about Fields because I feel like what Fields did today is a nice reminder of how he understands his tools and how to use them. He spent the first half where if he did get any positive yardage, because there was not much positive yardage to go around, it was via scrambling, rolling out, nobody covering him, go run for a couple yards, get 8, get 9, get 10, first down. He ended up, if memory serves, with 30 yards on the ground, so it wasn't a ton, right? No. But it was enough, apparently, to where when he wheeled around on that Pettis touchdown, the entire 49er defense just sold out going to cover him, and Fields set his feet, and even one of the brightest rainbow balls that you're going to see dropped into Pettis without anyone remotely close to him. And then guess what, Danny? Credit to what this offense does. I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, but somebody made a massive block downfield. EQ. Was it EQ? Because
it was EQ. And if I saw the play right, I want to say he even threw a block to keep Fields upright, and then he sprinted across field during the duck and went and blocked for Dante Pettis,
which is huge. I mean,
like, and I could be misseeing it. I don't want someone to come at me. You're wrong. Like, I'm just going off of what I think I saw in the moment.
We'll get the all 22 on Monday. Yeah. I know I'm excited to review it, but the point is that we didn't have guys standing around waiting for the play to end. We didn't have people taking penalties. We didn't have everybody trying to run the same direction. It felt like the whole team hustled from whistle to whistle throughout the game. I mean, whether it was Jaquan Brisker absolutely flying around, right? Whether it was the fact that, by the way, they ran just enough of those rollouts to where when EQ sold a block and then popped out for a route, he was Robert Tonyan open when on that crosser that Fields then just dropped right into his hands.
Disrespect.
It's not as if, I know. It's not as if I feel like Fields had some incredible game today, but weirdly enough, and I saw this in the comments, I want to just repeat it. This was a game where Fields carried the offense to a win. It wasn't pretty. It's not like Fields has a sparkling stat line. He does not. But it's the truth that a huge play by a young quarterback catapulted this offense into 19 points, which is not a ton. I mean, I know I mentally have this offense at about 19 and a half points per game, which is not incredible, but unlike the Nagy era, they didn't end up with 3, They put up a respectable point total, and a feisty defense defended the lead. And that's kind of what you're aiming for. It helps that I swear there was a flash flood the moment the Bears took the lead. Like they went up 2 scores, and the football gods themselves said, "Nuh-uh, Trey, you're not allowed to throw the football." I kind of felt bad for Lance near the end of the game because we could barely see through the rain to watch the game, let alone could Trey grip the football and let that thing fly. But you know what I mean.
Football, and it became evident, at least to me, near the end of that third quarter, where if his first read wasn't open, he was gone. He was just drop, go, drop the eyes, get upfield. And there's nothing wrong with that. It resulted in first downs and rushing yards and stuff like that. But it's just like, you can see why, if the rumblings from last year are true, this, that, the other, that he didn't want that specific quarterback. Now, whether or not it's true, we'll never know until years and years down the line kind of thing. But you can see where that kind of frustration would set in, where it's like, even as something as simple as the tight end off the play action, Jimmy probably hits that throw.
Right.
Or just making a simple route progression from 1 to 2 to 3, get the ball out. But it's the growing pains.
Yep.
Their ceiling is much higher with Trey under center than it is with Jimmy under center, because we kind of know where that ends.
Well, I mean, it ends in apparently a Super Bowl appearance and a separate NFC Championship game appearance. I'm not even like I would qualify myself as a Jimmy G hater. But to say we know where that ends, like, I will say that nerds like me have been way too vocal about Jimmy G critique when the team does. Look, Danny.
Oh, I'm 100% a Jimmy G hater. I think that guy sucks.
I can be a Jimmy G hater, but I still think that the Jimmy G offense manages to put 21 points on the board. Like, Bears lose in a heartbreaker kind of thing. I'm not saying that I know. I don't.
For sure.
But once those wide open 25-yard dig routes dried up, it felt like the San Francisco passing offense didn't have any particular fangs.
And there was more than just the weather at play. Javon Kinlaw going out as early as he did when he was clearly abusing the interior very early on matters. Jeff Wilson becoming the primary back when Eli Mitchell gets announced out for the game with a knee issue. Those are things that matter. But
right.
It's football. Everyone gets hurt. Everyone eventually has to miss some time or this, that, the other.
Yep. And speaking of, we're going to have to keep an eye out there on Jalen Johnson, just like the 49ers are going to have to. Like, it was a nice week to not have George Kittle out there. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
I feel like number 85 did not have, for the Bears, obviously, did not have a particularly good game. I mean, I don't know. But the Bears, somebody texted me to use an example. They were like, what is up with Mooney? And I'm like, well, the only target Mooney's had got picked off, and the Bears have 26 passing yards. So there wasn't a ton of passing stuff to go around, partially because this 49er defense is really well put together. But credit to the offensive line. I mean, this is the kind of thing, Danny, that I feel like we can point out an adjustment that the Bears went from getting abused on offense to being just good enough to win, apparently, by the end of the game, that I can't wait to actually look at the All-22, because when you hear that Tevin Jenkins is rotating with a guy playing on a club, it's awfully strange. But the Bears offensive line went from getting destroyed to apparently good enough. And I'm very interested to figure out what happened there, because the Bears obviously made just good enough decisions to jimmy out some yards in the run game. I feel like Khalil Herbert's performance is going to go unsung, but we should sing it. That he's doing a really good job being a one-cut running back that can find the lane and hit it. And I feel like, honestly, it's something that 32, David Montgomery, is struggling with a little bit, but I don't want to start any fights on the internet today.
I mean, but that's something we talked about a couple years ago with David Montgomery, that he's got tremendous feet and ability to make people miss and stay upright. That's his gift. But sometimes when you rely too much on your gifts, you're going to run into that issue. This isn't a new thing with David Montgomery. I'm a Montgomery fan. I'm never going to sit here and besmirch the guy, but Khalil Herbert was Two things can be true. You can like a player and he can have a bad game, and you can think that the backup isn't as good, but he can have a better game.
Right.
This was a game more for Khalil Herbert, who just get downfield,
hit the hole,
lower
and go.
Your shoulder, go.
And on that touchdown that he had, I feel like Herbert's is a bit stronger when it comes to cutting back than David Montgomery is. Now, where 32 really beats up 24 is pass blocking. It does feel like Montgomery is much stronger in a blitz pickup role or an outlet back role, like we saw in his reception that he picked up the field for some 10, 15 yards. There are plenty of things, I would say the little things to being a running back that David Montgomery does, I think, a lot better than Khalil Herbert. But Montgomery soaking up 17 very unproductive carries is something that just, I mean, we're happy.
It doesn't do anybody any good. It's just him getting beat up.
It does a lot of people pretty bad, as a matter of fact, because if you're going to call a run on almost every second down, and that run's going to average. That was the part I
was going to get to.
Right.
It felt very neggy-ish at points, or if it was second and 7+, it's like they're handing the ball.
We're running the ball.
To get to. Here it comes. And just good. God, man, throw the football.
Right. And I mean, there's some of that stuff that truly, Danny, we don't know because we aren't on the sidelines. And we can't tell if there was Justin Fields sitting back there saying, do not make me throw that ball. It's not going to work on second down. Like, I don't know because it was slippery. I mean, it was wet out there.
The field conditions were to that where when you saw Khalil Herbert sometimes hit open grass, or even look at Pettis on that touchdown. Those are two not just fast, but they're legitimately NFL fast, and they look like they're running in mud.
Yep,
it's like that's the conditions of what the field was like yesterday or this afternoon.
It was today.
This afternoon.
R.I.P.
Rip the dream, fam. Rip the dream. But it's just one of those things you have to understand that the field conditions were not good. And if anything, had you told me that this was the conditions coming into the game, I'm the person I shout from the mountaintops. I love Shanahan, the play caller, because if he figures out inside zone is working. He's going to line up inside zone in 18 different looks and punish you with inside zone until you can't stop it.
Right.
Because he doesn't care. But I think it was actually you who brought it up where if you take away the accessory plays that allow him to just abuse you with it, it makes it a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't just key on play action and just be like, all right, this is what we're going to do.
Yep. 100%. And it's what a weird game, man. But a good weird game. Very good weird. I mean, if anything, this feels like something that you truly can build off of. I mean, look, Danny, far be it from me to completely leave analytical thinking at the side, right? Mm-hmm. But silly stuff like Justin Fields taking the knee in the victory formation and he leading the entire offense down the field to just slip and slide and have a ball in a big win that they know as well as we do, nobody predicted, is the kind of stuff that just makes you think that maybe the Bears have really found something. I mean, the funny part is that when I say that, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, Fields is a Hall of Famer. Like, the 49ers found something with Jimmy G, man. Like, there can be the right combination. Yeah,
exactly. And sometimes you don't need. And again, is it easier to get the proverbial spin at the wheel in the playoffs when you have Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes,
Tyreek
Lamar
Hill,
Jackson, et cetera? Yeah, when you have these quarterbacks at the helm, it is easier to get the proverbial spin at the wheel. Sometimes you need your quarterback, though. And at this point, I don't need Justin Fields to be Justin Herbert or Pat Mahomes. I need him to be the best version of Justin Fields he could potentially be.
Right. And I mean,
and I think to your point, seeing the slip and slide at the end and the rallying of his team following behind him, that kind of it's like the same thing. Like, it's easy to laugh when Flus is introduced and preaching the hits principle, and he sounds kind of like a goofy college coach.
God, you say goofy college. I'll go even harder. I felt like his get the track shoes on thing was like,
oh yeah,
that was like high school JV coach tier. Like in the world of just, I'm not saying that, you know, you get where I'm coming from.
I do, but it's like, it's one of those things, like, we are on the outside of that locker room.
Right.
Now, I will tell you, football players are weird. Coaches are weird. They're not normal citizens of the United States. You know, they're built a little bit differently. This kind of rah-rah stuff just works for them.
And maybe most importantly, in my opinion, I think that when I take a look at this game, that you can really note the fact that the 49ers, they had an illegal man downfield penalty. They had multiple defensive holding penalties. They had late hits on Justin Fields. They gave the Bears tons of chances that the Bears did not give back. I mean, we are very accustomed to seeing a late hit get called that extends a drive. We're very accustomed to seeing stuff go against the Bears that, I mean, it kind of happens to all sorts of teams throughout the league. And you could say that it's good penalty luck. I mean, there's totally truth to that. But the Bears were disciplined today. I mean, they did all those little things. It's a silly thing to point out, but in the pouring rain, Danny, rookie Trenton Gill still caught the 15 to 18 yard long snap and got the punt away. Touchback or not. Like, that's huge. And so all that little stuff I take a look at. And
there's other little things that make you do like the ooh as like a fan, like seeing Dominique Robinson bend the edge and get Trey Lance by the shoulder pad and rip him down with one arm. Stuff like that is big because that's a rookie contributing on a 5th round contract. So he had 1.5 sacks. And the other part about that is if you're like a person who loves like the ability to transfer speed to power and seeing pure unadulterated grown man strength, Trey Lance is not a small person.
No.
He ripped him down with one arm.
Yep.
Like that's big boy strength. It's like, oh,
That's wild. That's a 5th round pick. Danny, not to crow too hard about that. Arrowhead Pride did this like legendary article back in 2014. So old data, I know. But they went round by round, position by position, taking a look at how often that position turns out a starter. And what they found is that only 6% of players picked after round 4 at edge make any impact at all. Like, whether they would have had to qualify as a starter to make this category, but Dominic Robinson out of the 5th round doesn't happen normally. Travis Gibson out of I think he was the 4th round. Or he was the 5th round too?
I know he was out of Tulsa. I thought they traded a future. He might have been a 4th. I think they traded a future 5th to go back up into the 4th to go get it.
I think you're right.
Maybe that,
or maybe it was a future 4th to get a 5th. It could have been whatever, but
something like that. Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head.
That doesn't normally happen. I mean, there is a whole lot of they traded a future 4th for Gibson into the 5th. If the Bears, oh my goodness, we do not know yet, just to be so clear. But if the Bears, because Mike McGlinchey's no pushover, found an instant starter out of the 5th dadgum round, Danny, there are a lot of things about this team that start to change pretty quick. Like, everybody has gone into a Bears offseason before. Let me say this before I'll give it to you, and then we'll hit break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some of the specifics. But
sure,
we have all been a part of these off seasons where we go in and we say, if Equanimeous St. Brown was just overlooked by the Packers, and if Byron Pringle was really starting to hit his stride, and if Dominic Robinson is a beast, and if the whole league just missed on Braxton Jones, and if Larry Borum really picks it up, and if Justin Fields takes that next step, the Bears are going to be 11-5. Like, I've been a part of so many of those. I grew up a Bears fan. We do this, right? But
you talk yourself into the best case scenario.
There are a lot of these things that are breaking the Bears' way right now. That, hey, it's one game. Week 1 overreactions are common across everything because obviously the Rams suck, right? Like, I mean, what we saw on Thursday night was not a good showing by them. Let's ease off just a little bit. We don't know, but this is a huge win. A lot of the players like Brisker, like Robinson, like Fields, sort of, like ESB. I think we saw good things out of Pettis. We saw a lot of good from a lot of players that needed to be good this year, including...
We also saw some very good blocking out of Byron Pringle when he was out there. Like, it's small stuff, but it matters.
It's the stuff the Packers have been doing to absolutely kill the Bears for forever. I mean, it's a simple play to go back to, but any chance you remember, in the middle of the second drive... I feel like, or in the middle of the second drive, Darnell Mooney caught a swing pass with somebody, I think it was Pringle, as a matter of fact, out in front of him. Pringle hit a big block, and Mooney turned out 7 yards, that when the Bears then ran the ball in the next play and got 4, picked up a first down. It's those little things where in the Nagy offense, it felt like if they threw a swing pass out there, the guy's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage because the blocks were just never there.
Yeah, and that's a mentality and a coaching thing.
So Cody Trough asks, who most surprised me in this game at this point? I'm going to go with the entire defensive line, by the way. I could say like Roquan Smith, I could say Nick Morrow, but I really expected this defensive line to get pushed and shoved around a lot more than they did. And the 49ers had their moments. They had their big runs, but they didn't gash the Bears like I anticipated, what I would call the most creative run scheme in football to do, and that might be what really put this game on Trey Lance's shoulders, you know? That if the 49ers didn't need to throw, they wouldn't have, but they ended up needing to throw. And massive credit to, I can't wait to figure out who it is. Like, was it Angelo Blackson making all these stops? Was it Justin Jones coming up with these big plays? Who was soaking?
Was it Armon Watts?
Could have been.
I saw Watts get in there a little bit, especially near the end, but who knows? Like, I really need to go back and watch it.
Who was soaking the blockers? I want to know.
It's all recency bias, yeah. Especially in this defense. The nose tackle matters for just, hey, free people up. Let people go hit.
Right. Danny, any other overarching thoughts before we get into some of the specifics?
I will, you know what? I'll save my overarching thought because it's a specific player I wanted to give his flowers, who I'm normally very critical of.
I can't wait. Perfect.
Yeah.
In that case, I'm going to flip us over. So we'll let our sponsors get a word in, and we will see you guys after the break. Talk to you in a bit.
Hey, sponsors.
And we are back with. I'm gonna reset that. That was awful. I forgot the name of my own podcast. Like, I mean, that was one of those.
What are you doing?
I had a child. My brain has left me. But anyways,
and now you're dealing with an oversized child on the other end of the camera.
Right. Well, no, come on. Give yourself more credit than that. Anyways, resetting in 3, 2. And we are back with Bear With Me. I'm here with Danny Meehan going over the Chicago Bears' huge win over the San Francisco 49ers that, if I could be honest with you, Danny, this feels, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, like the inverse feeling of how I felt in the Week 1 2019 massive epic loss that the Bears suffered at the hands of the Packers. I know that just made you grouse, but this is a win.
I had blacked that game out in my memory.
This is a win that I never saw coming, much like that game was a loss that I never saw coming, but this one has me feeling particularly perky. So as we now get into the second half of this podcast, Danny, I find it only best that we talk about some specific players. You said there was somebody you wanted to give flowers to. Who you got?
So I will give my flowers, especially because in the first half I thought he looked really rough, and that's Eddie Jackson. I'm on Rule 3, on even when you listen to the Lunch Pail Draftcast and whatnot, I'm very critical of Eddie because when you're paid like a top 5 safety, you better play like a top 5 safety. And I get a lot of what he does isn't quantified, this, that, the other. It's like the Brian Urlacher argument where he didn't have tackles that Ray Lewis and London Fletcher did. Why is he in the Hall of Fame kind of thing?
Right.
But especially with how it started when Deebo Samuel put his thump into him to get into the end zone and put him on his ass.
This is rough.
And it was like, oh, here we go. Like, dude, wrap and drive. Stop trying to throw your shoulder into someone, especially someone like Deebo who runs with conviction. But, you know, he settled down. He started making plays, and I think we may have started to see, like, the I don't want to call it a reemergence, but the Eddie getting the monkey off his back, so to speak. Like, when he got that interception, if you could kind of, like, feel the weight being lifted off him figuratively when – it's like the Steve Young thing where he finally wins the Super Bowl and he goes to his teammate, oh, finally take the monkey off my back kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like it almost felt like that for Ed. Now, obviously, first game, things can change. But I said when they hired Matt Eberflus, when they drafted Jaquan Brisker, this, that, the other, that this feels like this. If there's ever a situation for Eddie to get back right and become Eddie again, it's this situation.
Yep.
With these linebackers in front of him and that safety next to him.
Yep. And I'll tell you, okay, so, Danny, I hate the term stan because I think that there are some youngins out there that don't recognize where it comes from. And that song,
and the man, baby.
I mean, while that song is awesome, being a stan is not something to be proud of. That's the whole point. But
yeah, it's scary.
I am kind of an Eddie Jackson stan. And so, like, there's tons of this stuff that, like you're saying, I mean, this is the Eddie Jackson that I feel like I always saw in his game, but finally he's playing on a secondary that's tight enough to give him the opportunities that quarterbacks just didn't have to take when they had Kindle Vildor, who I'm not totally trying to hate on Kindle Vildor, but
he had another rough game at the start too today.
Oh yeah, but when you have Tashawn Gibson and Kindle Vildor and Duke Shelley all taking up space on the field, like, you just don't have to push the ball into Eddie Jackson territory when you don't feel like it. And rookie mistakes and all from Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Kindle Vildor, Eddie Jackson, and there's a fifth one, Jalen Johnson is a much better secondary and is going to give Eddie Jackson many more chances when, I mean, it's not an accident, Dan, that he picked up his first interception since, I believe, 2018. If I understand it correctly.
I think so, because I think he had a couple taken away from him.
But he picked it up in the first position in a long dang time when the opponent had to press. The Bears have not been a good enough team to put opposing offenses in a position where they have to take chances that they do not want to take for quite some time. They did that today. They forced a ball to somebody who, oh goodness, I'm going to have to change the adjectives, is a very, very good deceiver. He is a master at for getting the ball like to come in his direction. So like Eddie made that play. Like, there are a lot of safeties that we've seen. Deshaun Gibson last year had a perfect interception that I like to laugh about because Mark Andrews dropped the ball right into his hands, literally, like rolled over.
It was a it was the look what I got moment.
Right. That happens all the time where somebody can end the season with 3 or 4 interceptions and none of them were actual made plays. This was a made play. I felt like, did you?
I didn't know. Like we were talking pre-show. I felt like again, like you kind of mentioned, I'm not sure if he baited or read, but he broke and he took the ball away. And I'm also the guy who says you can't game plan 4 turnovers. And that's what I was probably said that ad nauseum a couple years under Fangio and Desai, where it was just like, you can't, turnovers are not a game plan until you start preaching that kind of thing, where it's just like everyone rally, everyone punch, everyone go for the ball.
Right.
And that's something that wasn't done under Fangio. And that's fine. That's just not his style. Fangio is one of the foremost defensive thinkers in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Or was. He's not coaching right now, I don't think.
Super good anyways. That 2018 Bears defense is legendary.
Yeah, it's legendary. So it's just one of those things, like, it's a mentality thing. And this is clearly, you see it already, where it's just like, they're all like trying to stand up and punch, and if they're blocked, they're even swinging one arm out. That's how Jalen Johnson got that forced fumble. He literally he was blocked. He stuck his left arm out and he just punched it.
Punched at it. I mean, it's fun. It's really fun to watch because this team. Okay, so I didn't think that this defense. Honest opinion, I don't think I wanted to believe that this defense was going to be able to put up fights like this, but they did. I'm interested to see what happens against quarterbacks that are able to stretch the passing offense a little bit more, because I do think that the Bears are pretty liberal about keeping somebody in the box to stop the 49ers run attack, but this was stingy. I mean, this was truly anything that any super positive borderline Homer Bears fan would have said about Eberflus did this in 2018 with the Colts. Why can't he do this with the Bears defensive personnel? Holding a team to 10 is hard. Holding Kyle Shanahan to 10 is very hard. And so, flowers to Eberflus, Eddie Jackson, whoever you want to give it to, because I saw somebody in our chat here say that they thought Roquan was underwhelming. John, I hear you, because inside linebackers are generally, I don't want to say that it's an underwhelming position, but it is, Danny, a harder position to succeed than it is to fail.
Yeah.
But Roquan even made some electric tackles when Lance scrambled that were key.
I think he was. I said it pre-show. I think he was very meh to start the game, and it's like, it sounds weird, but some fighters don't know they're in a fight until they get hit in the face, kind of thing. Right. And I think Roquan had his first big pop on someone and realized, all right, let's go. Mm-hmm. And then he had a few, I think 3 or so, where he put Lance into the dirt. Right. And it was like, all right.
I mean, there was one of them, I remember the commentary team immediately popped up and went, oh my goodness, I don't know how the 49ers are comfortable with their quarterback taking a hit like that. And they were right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Lance, I mean, obviously he's a 23 or 24-year-old kid taking that hit. He'll bounce up just fine. It's when years down the line, out of those hits affect the body kind of thing. Right. Shouts out to Cam Newton and Josh Allen. But It was a fun game. I don't want to get too out over our skis, but if you're really looking for the silver lining in an already great weekend for the Bears, it's that everything you could have wanted to happen for the best case scenario is kind of already wheels in motion. Mm-hmm. And it's a big deal in terms of the culture setting, because that's what this year really is. It's a culture reset. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of culture reset and developing for the future, I'm going to go through a list of players that I want to ask your opinion on, right? Sure. Let's start with some of the offensive linemen. What did you think of Braxton Jones?
I think Nick Bosa ate his lunch. It's not just him. Nick Bosa is going to do that to quite legitimately almost anyone he lines up against. Could he have been better? Absolutely. Could he have been a hell of a lot worse? Sure. I mean, he's a 5th-round rookie out of Southern Utah going up against one of the foremost pass rushers in the league. He was going to get his lunch taken from him a few times. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to honestly go back and watch his tape because it's hard to do line evaluation on the first watch because you're not I know at least me, I don't watch it that terribly closely.
I hear you. I think if anything, okay, it's funny because I go back and think about it, and I'm like, well, how many clean pockets does Justin Fields really have? He had one. He quickly, or I guess he had two. He threw the play to Pringle, and then he threw the touchdown to ESB on clean-ish pockets. And he also had that nice long throw to Pringle that Pringle just had no separation whatsoever, but the ball seemed nice enough. But all that to say, I mean, I guess I feel like Braxton Jones wasn't a total incomplete liability. I mean, we watched...
No, I don't think he was he was just like unplayable, get him off the field.
Right. I mean, if anything, I almost look back and I think to myself, I'm surprised that Jones held up as well as he did, because I can't help but feel like that Thursday night game was a nice reminder to me, the Bills-Rams game, if that wasn't clear, that a really good player will just embarrass perfectly good players.
And it's not like it's going to get any easier next week with the Packers.
No.
And Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary and those boys coming in Lambeau.
Which, speaking of, any chance you've got a score checker handy and you know how the Packers are doing right now? It's 4-21.
We're down 7-0. The game is on my screen.
I ask because there is part of me that thinks that if the Bears can make that one another low-scoring slobber knocker, they might just be able to jimmy loose, I don't know, like 17, 20 points. Because, look, I felt like this 49ers defense was a nightmare matchup for the Bears, where they were weak, where the Bears were weak, secondary versus wide receivers, but they were strong where the Bears were also weak, defensive line versus offensive line. And so whether it was running the ball, whether it was passing the ball, I mean, the worst part about this game, Danny, is that first 4 to 5 drives, there are some people that were saying it looked a lot like the Nagy offense. I know that plenty of people did. I feel like that's what offense looks like when your offensive line is getting shuttered by the opposing defensive line, because there just aren't many plays in football that work when they're beating you on the ground, they're beating you to the quarterback trying to pass the ball, and they're eating your lunch on screens. Like there's not a lot of plays that really work when that's the circumstance.
Yeah, I forget what football movie it was from, but there's a scene where he's like, we can't complete a pass, we can't run the ball. Other than that, we're doing great.
Right. I mean, and that's not to say that things can't change, but the Bears in this one specifically started really, really bad on the offensive line, defensive line matchup. And now the more I talk about it, the more that I feel like you're saying, I'd love to ask you about Braxton Jones, about Larry Borum, but we don't really know until we can sit back and click through the plays.
Obviously continue with your list. I can give you my first impression, but it's hard, especially with the inside, like not the interior, but the offensive line itself. It's hard to really, like, I know Larry Borum specifically had a couple where he buried his guy. Right.
I was going to say, did anybody stand out to you? Did Larry Borum stand out to you, even if it was on the run game?
Yeah, Larry Borum had a couple plays where he buried a guy, and I'm not like some Larry Borum guy. I still think at this moment in time he might be better inside than out, but I don't think that's in the plan. So my opinion doesn't matter on that.
Hey, I'll tell you that if Larry Borum can find an edge in the run blocking, I thought he was awful last year when it came to run blocking, and that's not even to say that's me just trying to be as blunt as I can. Because if he can take a step forward, if he can find that angry edge that he needs to, I felt like he was, not to say playing patty cake, but he was barely doing his job, just getting in the way of people. I didn't
kind of won last year the same way he won at Missouri. Like
right.
He's enormous.
Just shoving himself in between him and the runner.
I'm going to get in your way, and I'm going to be very hard to get around.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. You can win that way. It's kind of how Orlando Brown wins in Kansas City. He's not like doing a whole lot. He's just kind of getting in your way.
Right. And if that's not something that he has to deal with, or if that's a place that he can improve, I can understand him starting. I mean, I didn't necessarily look at this game today and think, why is Riley Reif not on the field? Because when the Bears were playing badly, to use the first play of the game, that screen pass where somebody broke right past Cody Whitehair so quickly that Fields had to loft the ball to, I think it was Khalil Herbert, and Herbert almost got his head taken off on account of it. There were a whole bunch of plays throughout this game where it wasn't necessarily the tackle's fault. It would be like this one was on an interior offensive lineman. This time he, like an edge rusher whipped around and made a sack. Really the only critique, I don't understand. Far be it from me to question the coach on the eve of a win. I don't really understand switching your guard, like having a rotation.
That made no sense to me.
I would like to understand it. And somebody said it was trying to get Patrick ready to play, but I don't really get.
I can understand that, but if you can club him up now, why couldn't you club him up in the third week of the preseason? I guess
that plus we're not planning on a season where Patrick plays guard. And all I've been told
he's a center.
Right. All I've been told from guys like Lester Wiltfong, JB, like Bill Zimmerman, even I've heard it with
offensive line authority.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I hear about offensive line play, one of the biggest things I hear is that if you can get your line set, leave it there. And so while I get wanting to get a couple guys work, like Cody Trough says, getting them into football shape, I feel like maybe it would have made more sense to just let Jenkins play at right guard if he is the right guard. But heck, I don't know, and it worked. So again, I'll question it instead of just outright critiquing it. A couple other guys I could think of. We already talked a little bit about Dominique Robinson, but like, what stood out to you?
The grown man strength, obviously. Kind of how ready he seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it obviously, I'll get a better idea when I go back through the game later this week and watch the eye in the sky, as it were. But he didn't seem like really overwhelmed. Like He seemed like he was meant to be there, and he had good pop. He had the inside rip move to go get that sack and whatnot. It's just, he just looked like he belonged. I wouldn't have never guessed he's a guy who transitioned from quarterback to safety down to defensive end and was playing his first NFL game after 2 years at the end position, or the edge position, I guess, at Miami.
I don't even think it was 2 years. I get the impression that he played there for like a year.
Yeah, whatever it was.
It was apparently enough because he looked like an NFL defensive end.
Yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm. And then Jaquan Brisker, tell me about what you thought.
Star? Like everyone was gushing about 29 Tanoga. I can't think of his name off the top of my head for San Francisco, but it was almost like a match game. Like whatever he was doing, I'm gonna go do this. And make no mistake, Jaquan Brisker, this was a game tailor-made for him to go kind of nuts. It was come downhill, it was make hits, it was go be Jaquan Brisker. There's going to be games where he's going to look like a rookie and he's going to have his welcome to the NFL moment.
Right.
Like similar to like Kyler Gordon had, where he, at first glance, that looked like he just thought someone was going to be over top waiting to help him.
I mean, that looked to me, just to use that as an example, it was cool because that's exactly the kind of play that you'd anticipate a rookie corner to mess up, because it looked to me like the receiver sold a release into the flat, that he was just going to run out as a flat option. And then he curled the route back up the field, and by the time Gordon figured it out, he was obviously way too far away. I mean, to use an example of a player I think is just obviously good, Jalen Ramsey bit way too hard on a flat route earlier this week on Thursday and ended up with, it was Stephon Diggs, right? That just ran right by him and got open. I mean,
when he made him do the 360 or the 180,
yes,
completely turned him around.
Obviously the best in the game make these mistakes, so rookies will make them too. But that's just a nice little welcome to the NFL moment of you got to have it nailed.
Right. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty sure he just blew the coverage is really what it was.
Could have been.
But at first glance, that really looked to me like he was handing him off to a safety who he expected to be there, and he wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm probably wrong on that, because it seems like everyone else thought that he just he bit.
Totally.
And that's part of it.
It's hard to tell. We get like one look at these things, you know? I wish that they gave us the all 22 vision or view more often. They don't. But that's fine. We get it later. But overall, I mean, we could keep going through. Let's see. We talked about Roquan? God, I think we just about talked about everybody, Dan.
The last guy, I would give him a little bit of credit because it's easy to crap on the receivers and their lack of ability, but I think EQ had a solid game.
Yeah.
He threw good blocks. He caught a touchdown. He did what was asked of him. And kind of to your point a couple of years ago when you said Kindle Vildor can't help the fact that he's Kindle Vildor at the end of the day. Equanimous really can't help the fact that he's Equanimous St. Brown and that he's limited in what he can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
He did what was asked of him. He caught a touchdown. He may end up being a surprise where maybe he gets himself a 2 or 3 year cheap contract in Chicago because of his familiarity with Getsy and the system or whatnot. We don't know. But at the end of the day, he did his job.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It's one of those things you can't hate a guy for doing what's asked of him.
Well, that's the Green Bay magic, man. Like what I feel like Green Bay has done a good job of for forever, and I hate that they're good at this.
Drafting offensive linemen in the 4th and 5th rounds.
Okay, they could sign somebody off the street, and that offensive lineman would play well. It didn't have to be the 4th and 5th rounds, but that notwithstanding, they would give their receivers a role, and then they would be. I feel like Green Bay's always been really smart about once they have a role, once Alan Lazard is the guy that blocks, right? Suddenly he's your target on a 3rd down, and the defense leaves the guy open that's just supposed to be doing the blocking, right?
Yep.
And then he ends up just catching them sleeping. I mean, EQ is not somebody I expect out there. We saw a pretty they for some reason highlighted EQ on a go route he had where he got less than 0 separation. If it was possible for the DB,
he was blanketed.
Oh yeah.
He was blanketed.
Like, it's not as if St. Brown is going to be out here making crazy cuts like Dante Pettis actually can do. But he can throw solid blocks. And because he can throw solid blocks, he can feint a blocking assignment and then go out for a route and just end up completely wide open like a tight end should. Like, that's something you'd normally expect 85 or 84 to do. But they didn't. It was EQ this time, and he ended up wide open. Like you're saying, I mean, this team did not look... This team, to me, if we can edge into final thoughts here, Danny.
Sure.
They looked like a team that when they got hit in the mouth, they realized just how much of a disadvantage they were at. This offense looked stunned. I mean, they were on the ropes from Jump Street, and if anything, they were almost... I don't want to say quitting, because they weren't quitting, but they looked like they had kind of accepted that this was just how the game was going to work out. And then Fields, especially right before that big play started, the like on the late drive at the end of the half that almost ended up as a field goal, seemed to start to rail against that. He seemed to be the first person that we saw on offense to break out of the pocket and find extra yards, to try to start making some, or to try to start forcing something to happen without literally forcing it like he had a couple days earlier. I feel like then, as this game moved on, the offense allowed their quarterback to kind of inspire them. And while they didn't end up with some phenomenal statistical day, they ended up with the win, and they ended up with a win by multiple scores. I mean, I believe this was one of the biggest margins of victory that the noon slot had in the NFL. Just by 9 points.
Most of them went to overtime, right? They all went. I think 3 of them went to overtime.
Mm-hmm. And so the physicality of the hits principle, Justin Fields' effect as a leader, all that stuff, all that intangible stuff that Bears fans hope and dream about during the offseason, it felt like it really bubbled up to the forefront against a team that is way better than what I think they showed. Whether it was penalties, whether it was injuries, I don't think the 49ers are due for some massive collapse at this point. But they lost the Bears, a team that I don't think had any business beating that defense. And that's something that you take to the bank. They're not going to take it away from us. Like, obviously, if we look back on this in 16 games and Fields never does any better than this isn't an amazing performance, but it's a really great week 1 showing. And in beating a team that I think this Bears team was without a doubt supposed to lose to. What did you think?
I think it goes to show what attention to detail and coaching can do for you if you just buy in. Like I said at the top of the show, coaching isn't always having the best talent. It's coaching up what you're given and just squeezing blood from the proverbial stone, as it were. I think they did a tremendous job. I think my belief in Fields has really never been higher than it could be right now, because there's something to be said for when odds are stacked against you. You've gotten punched in the mouth and you keep coming back, and you're willing to show that I'm not gonna let this affect me, which we knew that he had that. I mean, he's been in the spotlight since he was like 17 years old, whether it be at QB1 or at being that number one recruit to Georgia, and then transferring to Ohio State. Like he's got this in his DNA. He's not some aw shucks that I'm just happy to be here. He's wired for I'm meant to be good.
Right.
Now, how good, I don't know, remains to be seen. I do think the Bears do have their potential answer at quarterback, but it's a waiting game. We got to see how this year plays out, and I think that they've got the right coaching staff to get everything out of a under-talented squad, as it were. But they've got to clean up some things, obviously, and I think it's great that they made the most of what they've got out there today.
Yep. Somebody in the chat just put it in a way that I think is absolutely worth sharing, Danny. They Belichicked it. It wasn't pretty.
Right.
It's not something you said at the top of the show that they didn't get any style points for it, and they sure didn't. But they won, and they won way more convincingly than meets the eye, right?
Right. And obviously there's a way to calculate how pretty a win was, but at the end of the day, a win doesn't have to be pretty in the NFL.
Yep. I think somebody else mentioned Fields so far is the only second-year quarterback to get a win today, which obviously he played against Lance, so one of them was going to. But either way, not a bad title to have.
And Kyle couldn't play in New York. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, Kyle? Zach Wilson?
Zach with Kyle Wilson. There was an old Jets corner years ago drafted out of Boise named Kyle.
There you go.
My apologies.
Nice. The Rolodex. It's all up here, Danny.
It's all up here, guys.
It's all up here. Perfect. Danny, I'm super excited. I cannot believe that we're headed into Sunday night where we don't have to hear about how the Packers are, quote unquote, about to take the lead away from the Bears. This is the season start that I didn't dare to dream of, but here we are, right? And
you can't be disappointed if you have no expectations.
Right, exactly. I'm stoked. I'm sure you're stoked. Danny, anything you're working on right now that you can plug before we get out of here?
I know Jacob and I are working on doing a recap show for going over rookies we covered and didn't cover throughout the NFL season, so be on the lookout for that. I know we're working on a time slot and everything for that, but other than that, not really. No, I'm just kind of hanging out, working, being a husband. That's it.
Hey, it's a full-time job. I know what you mean. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will be back with you later this week. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel, Second City Gridiron, as we got plenty coming at you. We've got Lester's Sack Watch. We've got the 10-minute drill, and I am going to do what I can. We're going to see if this is realistic to get an 8 p.m. stream on Tuesday going for the All-22 so that we can get a look at the All-22 just that little bit faster. But I'm going to see this week whether that's actually doable. But keep an eye out. And then we will be there. I'm super excited to get busy and talk to you guys soon. Bear down, and thanks so much for bearing with me. Danny, we're clear. All right, that's awesome. That was legit. I'm with you, Ian B. I can't wait to see Sackwatch either. There's tons of stuff going on that I feel like totally works. I can't wait to rewatch this game because somebody said this earlier. I think it was either John or it was Derek that mentioned that there were obviously some kind of change that took place in the offense. I want to know what shifted after that Fields touchdown. My guess is that the 49ers started playing a little bit more drop coverage, just a little bit more, but it could be that they put Herbert in and Herbert and the Bears offense were able to jimmy loose some yards on the ground. It's honestly hard to tell. But
it's hard to tell, and I also wonder how much of it was just Fields saying, fuck it, I got to make something happen.
I know. can I say, Danny, that this is stupid. This is a stupid, like, gut feel ism, right? I have no way to prove this. But the Bears offense for the last 3 years has managed to take what they should have scored and get less of that, right? In fact, that's pretty normal across the league. I'd say Arizona does this all the time, where they have way better talent and they have honestly good enough play calling to score way more than blank, but they only scored 60% of that. You know what I mean?
Cliff Kingsbury.
I feel like this Bears offense got every single point. Okay, they missed the two PATs. But outside of the two PATs, they got every single point they could have possibly gotten in this game. Like, I feel like they really maximized their opportunities, which
they did. And I think it's credit where it's due. Like you said, Getsy clearly saw something wasn't working and he changed something. Now, how much of it was just them going to drop? Was it Justin Fields giving the old middle finger to saying, I'm going to try to stick in here and let the play happen? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And William, I see in the chat, like, I hear what you mean about Fields not looking very good. In my honest opinion, I feel like today's a weird day to judge because either Fields and Lance both looked absolutely horrible or the field was horrible. Like, the field was atrocious. And maybe it just, like, if we'd had another quarterback across from Fields, Danny, like, honestly, Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't have been a bad one. It would have been a good day to evaluate just how bad the field was out there. Like, it was a gross day, but if Jimmy G's only throwing for 140, then you know that it was just a rough day to throw the football. But
and here's the rhetorical question that has nothing to do with the Bears. How long is Lance's leash?
I want to believe that after trading up 3 first-round picks, that it is forever. But it's not. Like, I mean, it can't be.
No, it's not.
You can't lose the Bears. Like, I love the Bears, obviously.
This is a game. This was your gimme.
You can't lose the Bears. Not with the teams that they have in their division. Like, you just can't lose the Bears. And it's great that the Bears beat them anyways, but you can't lose to the Bears. And he did.
Nope.
So I would argue that if he has, let's say, 7 strikes, he just gave up 2 of them because that, like, you can't lose that game. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
The funny part is, to go back to it, William, the hard part about the NFL is that sometimes a perfectly good quarterback has just a horrible game. Russ Wilson has had tons of really bad games. Aaron Rodgers has had plenty of games that were just awful. I mean, we could go through the laundry list. It's certainly more common to have bad games when you're a Ryan Tannehill type quarterback, Derek Carr type quarterback. That's, good, but not a Hall of Famer. But
Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm. But to use Lamar as a silly example, because Lamar and Justin are not the same, right? Lamar has had plenty of games where statistically he was pretty awful, but the Ravens won, and he was because of it, right? And so Fields may end up, we'll see, but Fields may end up a perfectly good quarterback, partially because of the will to win, but we're going to have to see it. We're going to have to see it at some point against a team that doesn't have such a massive matchup advantage over the Bears' offensive line. You could call that excuses, but I think it's realistic that
I think it's going to happen again next week. I mean, they're playing Kenny and
Devontae Wyatt rules. I don't care what the camp reports say. Like, he's a stud. Preston
Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith. I mean, they're playing a bunch of dudes next week. And really, to be fair, all things being equal, Justin Jefferson's just out here breaking loose. And water is also wet.
Well, Justin Jefferson's a bad man. Like,
he just scored a touchdown on a crosser. Mm-hmm. And took it upfield. There it is. All right.
At this point,
can I say in the vein of the Vikings, Dalvin Cook is a joy to watch play football. That guy is awesome.
He's really good, especially when he's not hurt.
Yeah.
It's weird because within this game, like, William, I want you to know I completely get where you're coming from. I feel actually pretty cheesy and corny and homerish making excuses for Fields' performance because that first half was awful. Like, the interception he threw was bad. He had no velocity on the football pretty much all day long. And he made some crazy plays, but not only did Mitch Trubisky make some crazy plays, to use another stupid example, Danny, Christian Ponder has made crazy plays. Josh Rosen really never did, but he's kind of the only one. right? Like, I mean,
I'll always go back to that video you make of all NFL
a bunch of
great
chumps
plays.
making really
Yeah.
good plays. Yeah.
And it's Sean Mannion throwing like a 25-yard deep out. And it's like, oh my God.
Oh yeah. I mean, the weird part is that like I can't help but feel like at this stage, William, if I was going to be really, really honest, expecting zero developmental steps from Justin Fields, I think he's going to be a really good clean pocket passer. I think that if you can get weapons around him, he'll put the ball in their hand. I think he's way more mobile than a guy like Jared Goff, but I do worry that he won't ever put it all together, kind of similar to the way that Jay Cutler had all the talent in the world, but he never really put it together either. I'm hoping that changes. Ooh. Like, I'm by no means, if you know what, Danny, we live in a world where if the worst case scenario is that Fields is a franchise quarterback that's kind of a letdown, that's a huge dub for the Chicago Bears. Like, I mean, that's a good quarterback compared to the stuff that we've had to deal with for years and years and years. It's hard for me to dunk on Fields when I can see how much that offensive line struggled against their defensive line, and I know how much trouble their wide receivers had getting open, where Trey Lance had a perfectly, like, people are going to act like that's just San Francisco. It's extremely normal to have at least 4 or 5 wide-ass open receivers over the course of a game. Like, that's standard. And obviously you have to make some good throws into tight coverage outside of that. But today Fields got like 2. He cashed in on both of them, and everybody else was pretty much blanketed. So I hear you. Like, I get it. I'm not trying to create an excuse train either, and neither are you, Danny. But no. It's weird to watch Fields' performance today, in my opinion, and say that he played bad, when I would argue that Fields was the only reason that the Bears were able to score the points they did on offense.
I would say Fields is the reason the offense did anything.
I don't think Trevor Siemian scores more than about 6. Like, Tal thing included, right? Like, taking that for what it is. I don't think Trevor Siemian, who I thought nobody's going to like this. Trevor Siemian looked really good this preseason.
Trevor Siemian looked really good in limited action last year, replacing Jameis.
Right. But I'm not going to make a case that Siemian like outplayed Fields, but I will say that Fields today did some things that the offense desperately needed. Let me put it this way, Danny. Fields was the only moment that this is the easiest way I can put it. I got you here. Fields was the only piece of the offense that was better than what San Francisco can handle. Fields brought something to the offense that created just enough to put some pressure on a defense that otherwise could have pitched a shutout against, I don't know, like Andy Dalton, right? But because Fields was able to break away from the pocket like he was, and Dante Pettis obviously did his job, they got a touchdown. Because of that touchdown, it certainly seemed like the ball started rolling on the rest of the offense. It's hard to point the finger and say, like, star, not star, we'll get there. Ideally, one of these days we look back and we go, I guess we always kind of knew, huh? But with this game specifically, I'll take the fact that Fields seemed to me like the reason that they won, at least on offense, because that's what you can ask for. I would agree. And Khalil Herbert in the running game didn't jack all his touchdowns, which I am perfectly excited about. Like, call me a complete stats homer, but I do
I'll say is he's pacing for 34 touchdowns in 17 interceptions, my friend.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's on pace for an absolutely disgustingly low yardage total. But we will see.
I got a boogie though, Robert. I'll talk to you.
I'll catch you soon. Guys, 8 p.m. Tuesday night for the All 22 stream. That's not tomorrow. That's the day after that. And if I can get the game watched by then, I'm going to try to. I want to get more on the channel. And Lester doesn't know how to video edit, and Jeff doesn't either. Julie, you could tell Jeff that I said that because I think it's funny. But they're going to learn eventually. Until then, I'm doing the editing, if you can't tell, because I feel like it feels like I did the editing. But within that, I'm going to see if I can't get more content out. I want to do more small breakdowns. I love the All-22 stream. The All-22 stream is a great way to incentivize me to watch the game quickly and efficiently. And if you're in Texas, I sell mortgage. So if you're looking for a good rate, I can do that. But because I made that career change, full disclosure, it gives me a little more flexibility within my hours so that I'm not sitting at my old tech job watching film and feeling like I'm stealing from them. So Derek, yes, tomorrow is Bear and Balanced. We're right back on the Windy City Gridiron schedule, which is awesome. We're going to see if we can't get Bill's show, Bears Banter, on here, and Taylor Dahl's Making the Monsters on the channel as well as the other stuff. But All-22 stream, I'm trying to switch it from Wednesday, which was always way too late. Okay, quick straw poll while I've got you guys here, right? Is 8 p.m. a good time? I realized at one point that I wanted to do 7, but 7's like right in the middle of dinner. I actually don't know when works best for streaming. If 9 p.m. start is better, I can do that. I always felt like 9 p.m. start was way too late. And so you tell me, like, I don't want to do like 6 or something like that, but like I'm very curious about what kind of times work best for you guys, because I have like my church's small group meets 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, which is why I was always racing back to get home at 9. And so, and even then I'd be late. If I can move off of Wednesday, I want to. Plus, the sooner we get to look at the Bears film, the sooner we can iterate off of that and do smaller scale analysis on other things, which is fun. But no kidding, ENB. I completely agree. The fact that we were up till like 1 a.m. in plenty of cases was just silly, but we did it. I think 8 makes a lot of sense. That's obviously 8 Central Time. And so we can get into that. Plus, exactly, Brandon, it's not too late for Eastern time zones, but it's not in the middle of dinner. So you got time to get home, de-stress from work or school or whatever you got going on, and then jump in and watch some All-22 with me. But we'll figure it all out. The hope is that I can get the game digested by then, but I think I could pull it off. So we'll see. Like, Derek, that makes a lot of sense. Either way, we'll feel it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And we'll go back to Wednesday. But by doesn't work, I mean, like, I don't get the game watched. But if I can be honest, there were way too many moments where I had to, basically speed watch the game anyways. And I felt like it bled through. But this one, I'm very excited about. I'll give the offense a watch first. We can talk through the offense. But, I mean, I'm going to have to spend some time on the defense because the defense is just a massive reason that the Bears won it in the first place. But until then, guys, bear down. Thanks so much for bearing with me. You guys are awesome. If you've got any feedback on what's working, what's not at the channel, things that could be reorganized, things that maybe we could push other directions, we do, I don't know if Jeff has said this outright, but we do want to see if we can make a really strong push between this season, next season, the season after that. I mean, from the long view perspective, I don't think any of us expect this channel to be our full-time jobs. That's dreaming big, I guess. But we have now a 10,000 subscriber YouTube channel. The podcast is doing relatively well. And within that, we can start selling sponsorships like you may have seen on 10 Minute Drill with Prize Picks that can help us make sure that we spend that little bit of extra time and in a perfect world, give us a budget to put towards production. Whether that means finally getting Lester a decent looking camera, LOL. Whether that means hiring an editor to do more stuff where we can write and hand over the footage to somebody who edits it together and puts it down. Like, there's a whole lot of things that we want to do on this channel, and it's not going to work if we don't meet our audience where our audience wants to be met. You guys matter to us. You're the only reason we are here. And so whatever that looks like to you, let us know. And probably jump into the Discord to tell us, because I love that as a communal thing. And somebody asked earlier, are we going to get Lester and Jeff into the Discord? Yes, because I think that's a great way to make sure that we're talking to people. So we want to know what y'all want to see. And I'm going to keep my identity as, if it isn't obvious, as somebody who tries to create the highest quality Bears specific content that we can, and also does a lot more work on niche topics than most people do. Like, I don't think anybody else is out there making a 15-minute video, 16-minute super high production video on Velus Jones, but that's where my heart is when it comes to some of this stuff. I've obviously field stuff plays well, and so I'll probably be putting a fair amount of that out, but The All 22 streams are also, they've become a bit of a passion of mine because I can cover kind of the whole game. And that's great. You bet, John. I mean, that's the plan, is to do what I want to do. But while there is truth to that, we want to make sure, perfect. That's what I need. Awesome. You guys have a great rest of your day. Let's see. Derek, I think we may find a way to get Lester, though because Lester's the kind of guy that once it's working, he's in. But until he can see it working, he's like, stupid technology. Exactly like you'd anticipate. I feel like, oh, and by the way, just a sneak peek for anybody who watched this long, Sackwatch should be a lot of fun. Because not only are we going to be covering sacks, but I talked Lester into covering the occasional good play while he's at it. So you should get both sides of his offensive line analysis. It's not just the most negative video on the internet. At least that's not the idea. But it's awesome what I think we're building. I'm with you, Ian B. I really am excited about where I think we're going, because I think we really try to, on this channel at least, to tell the story of exactly what's happening. Because in the middle of the game, it's easy to have, I know I've fallen into this is pulling the curtain back maybe more than I should, but why wouldn't I think and feel the same way as anybody else during the game? We're all looking at the same thing. When we actually take a look at the game film, we can start to take a look at who's playing well, what actually went wrong. Like, did somebody make the wrong decision? Do we know? Like, is that throw as good as we thought it was? Do we know? And everything therein. So it should be really exciting. I'm stoked to get into it. And I'm with you, Ian B. I think blaming every sack on the offensive line can get kind of goofy. And if I can be blunt with you guys, I'm sure Fields held onto the ball too long on at least one of them. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there was nobody open. Either way, we're going to see. There's going to be a really interesting dance going on this season. Now I'm just starting a dialogue, so I'll get off here in a little bit. But there's going to be this interesting dance where we watch Fields develop, but we also watch him learn to distrust his offensive line. And I don't know if that's always good. So there are some of those plays that were only made because Fields already had a plan to bail out of the pocket, and then he found Dante Pettis. That really only happens because Fields doesn't trust his protection, and that's lit. The problem is that if he doesn't stand in the pocket, I worry that he's not going to bring what he's really, truly special at, which are some of those just gorgeous, gorgeous throws that he can make with the accuracy he has and the arm strength he has, like we saw last year, to the table. And so we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, like you said, Ian B., we'll only learn who this Bears team is going to be by watching the whole season, because next week is going to be interesting. We'll finally get to see the team play against another team on even weather footing. I mean, honest opinion. Okay, so I am just saying, because exactly, tumultuous. He didn't step up once his drop finished ever. But the Packers, come on webcam, do what I want. The Packers are down 17-0. So they may not be as good as we thought they may not be as good as Pete Bukowski said that they would be, or Aaron Nagler said they would be. And so that could be winnable. And if I'm just saying, if the Bears start the season beating the 49ers, beating the Packers, it's exactly a Kusai. That's a good point to bring up. The Packers got smoked week 1 last week by the Saints. So it's not a given. That's why I'm playing with the word if. If that team, the Bears, beat the Packers next week in Lambeau, not only is that going to be mayhem on Bears Twitter, not only is Dan Orlovsky going to just about get his Twitter account deleted with all the abuse he's going to have to take, him and Dominique Foxworth both. But the Bears will then take on Houston. They will take on the Giants. I mean, tumultuous. The funny part is about this Bears schedule is I don't even think most Bears fans will look at games like the Giants, the Falcons, who lost really close today, the Texans, how'd they do? Honestly, there's some of that stuff that I need to figure out. What just popped up? What are you trying to tell me, Google Meet? Yeah, I'm here. Are you kidding me? Anyways, none of those specific games the Texans did tie. You know what? Like, I don't think the Bears are good enough for us to take a look at this Bears schedule and say that any of these games are instant wins. But a game like this is a nice reminder that none of these games are instant losses either. And so whether the Bears go 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, 12-5, I mean, this is the kind of win that makes you just wonder, like, okay, did the 49ers just play awful football? Possible. Did the Bears play really strong defensive football? Also possible. And so, like you're saying, John, I'm very excited to see how this team stacks up against all levels of talent. I mean, I personally don't see a negative outcome for this Bears team, because if Justin Fields leads this team to a 9-win season, that is good news. Like, that is only good news. And then they pick up more weapons in draft and free agency. I don't know what's going to happen. I actually think the Bears have kind of a tough road to adding weapons to their team, just because, like, they have a first-round pick, they have a second-round pick, of course they do, but it's not as if there's a ton of great wide receiver free agent options hitting free agency. But, you know, I say that as if suddenly Juju Smith-Schuster, who was perfectly available, isn't absolutely lighting things up right now in Kansas City. So there's plenty of, okay, in the world of Madden Ultimate Team, or maybe just Madden, I would say that the Bears receivers right now average like a 71. I like Madden terms because I think they're easy. Free agency could pull their average receiver up to an 82. It's not that they're going to find any 90s. They're not going to find any super studs in that free agency class. But they could find some base plate receivers to then start building off of. And maybe they use a first or a second round pick on a receiver. And from there, you start to get a little bit more edge. But we'll have to see. The Bears haven't won the Super Bowl yet, but they did beat the 49ers. And until Tuesday,